Right, welcome to the kind of midweek edition of the podcast where we talk about all things mental health. And I'm proudly joined today, by former Royal Navy and Falklands veteran, former firefighter, and one of the original members of the crisis team, Andy Williams. How you doing, Andy? All right?
Absolutely fantastic. How are you, Chris?
I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on. I know you're busy with kind of all the crisis stuff that you do. So I'm very, very honoured to have you on and chat about bits and bobs. What I like to do with all the podcasts, as we kind of discussed before, is I get a bit of a background about yourself, where you grew up, and then ultimately what led you down the path that you took in life. And we'll just go through it from there, pal. So yeah, over to you.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's a big honour for me as well. I've watched one of your podcasts recently. I can't remember the guy's name now, but it was really interesting. I was interested particularly in your take from the mental health point of view, with all the sort of mutual support and help that's on offer. It sort of resonated with me, so I was really happy to jump on and join in if I can. So yeah, I was born in 1963, so I'm just nearly 61 now. Can't believe that. And I was born in Nottingham, a little place called Daybrook. Brought up on a council estate with my mum and dad and my one brother and two sisters, so three siblings all in all. So a fairly unremarkable childhood. I was very happy. Didn't really get into much trouble or anything like that. Absolutely bang middle of the road at school. Did my O levels and my GCSEs, and at 17, I was one of the oldest in my year. I just missed the cut-off from the previous year. So when I left school, I was knocking on towards 17. So I joined the Navy at 17 in October 1983 at Big Pond. In October 1980, as a mechanic, a marine engineering mechanic, or commonly known as a stoker. And a bit like my dad. My dad was a stoker in the Royal Navy during his national service. So I think he was particularly happy to see me following his footsteps. Yeah, so bit of a shock to the system, joined up, being shouted at. When you're sort of 16 and 17, I don't think you can really understand what's about to happen when you join the forces. The running, the yelping, the shouting, the beastings, and just the tellings off. I think I felt like from the moment I joined up in 1980 until I hit about 1983, I think I felt like I was constantly in trouble. There was all, and I didn't really settle down until I thought, hang on a minute, am I in trouble because they're just nasty, or am I in trouble because I'm always doing the wrong thing? And I think it was a combination of both. And so I probably grew up a lot faster than some of my contemporaries. I used to go home on leave and find my mates doing all the same stuff that they'd always done, and think, wow, I've moved on. This is a bit strange, and I've tried to share some of the things I've done.
That is the kind of thing, isn't it? When you're 17, it's difficult, and it's a difficult step to make when you're 17, 16, 17, or even 18 to kind of step away from that, everything you know. And funny you should mention Daybrook. I kind of lived in Daybrook for a little bit, and my dad grew up near Daybrook as well. So it's surprising to hear you say that. But yeah, you're kind of stepping away from that norm, and it is a big step, and it's very daunting, isn't it, at 17? And then you're stepping into this kind of man's world of being screamed at you, and it certainly is such a shock to the system, isn't it?
Yeah, bit of a culture shock. Yeah. And that bit where I felt like I was continually in trouble. It wasn't serious, but I felt like I was continuing trouble. Lasted for quite a while, but I think you just grow up so fast. You have no option. You have no option. There is no option. And then when I used to look around at my mates when I came back on leave, they were lagging behind. I'm not, no disrespect to them. They were in the proper place. It was me that had moved on. They were where people should be at that age. And yeah, I think you just have to grow up. But I mean, certainly during the Falklands in 1982, oh, what a step up that was. Like you're confronting your own mortality. I was 18. I was about to be 19, well, 18 and a half, and fairly well I was fairly well settled on the fact that I wasn't coming home. It seemed there were so many ships being hit, and we were in so much action at the time. It was fairly nailed on. You know, I don't think I'm going to get home, but you write those death letters, don't you? In the event, and if you're reading this, I'm sorry, that was a hard one to write. And then later on, finding it and ripping it up as well, think, "Oof, I got away with it." Yeah. So all at the age of 18, and I truly did believe. I didn't think any of us would make it. It wasn't. This is not me being dramatic or anything, but at the age of 18, I thought, well, this is it. But do you know something? The fear of not doing my job properly outweighed the fear of being killed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, that's a common occurrence, and I think you know when we move on, I think you kind of will touch on that with all the other careers that you've been in. It's certainly I've experienced that as well. That it's like the fear of letting your team down, your comrades, and your friends, and not looking like you're incompetent at your job. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, that has been a thread through my whole life. Is don't be incompetent. If you don't know, ask. Just if you are incompetent, just tell people I don't know. Show me how. Basically, show me how not to make a dick of myself. Show me what to do. I need to know.
Yeah, 100%, pal.
Yeah.
So, are you kind of what ship were you on down south? Were you on the was it the HMS Glasgow? I believe.
Yeah, it was a Type 42 destroyer. I think it was a batch one, so one of the first types of the Type 42s. It was a great ship. It was my first ship, actually. I'd just joined it. I think it was in February. And we deployed and went to Gibraltar. My first time at sea, we went to Gibraltar to do what was called spring train, where we would test all the systems and fire missiles and fire the guns and play mini war with other ships. But we never came home until when we were supposed to come home. We turned left and went down south instead of turning right to come home for Easter leave. And it got really serious really quickly.
Yeah, I bet. And it's like, I suppose when you go into them situations, I mean, I can't comprehend. I've never been involved in anything as kind of large scale as kind of the Falklands. So, but I've certainly been to some sort of nasty places on the planet. And when you're going in, you don't really kind of process it. But once you're kind of involved in the combat that you saw, suddenly the realization hits home. It's like, holy shit, this is not the stuff I'm seeing in the films or reading in the books. This is real. And I bet it takes a bit of processes, doesn't it, to things like that?
I think we did the processing on the way down. We did like a mini workup. We were learning. We like, as part of your job, you know what to do, but then you polish it, and make it so that it's second nature. So that when the lights are out, you can find the valve, or you can find the switch, or you can find your way out, or you can find your mate. You know where the sick bay is. You know where the escape routes are. So you're constantly practicing on the way down, and at the beginning we weren't sure. We think, well, I'm sure it'll be a diplomatic solution. It'll never come to war. And then the closer we got, we actually ended up being the first ship into the total exclusion zone. So the Glasgow was the first ship down there. It was actually the first ship back as well, because we got whacked. And then I think it was the first ship back down. So I had 2 deployments in 1 year.
Wow.
So yeah, so the first one, I was at sea for 83 days. Came back, we got fixed up double quick time because we'd been hit by a 1,000-pound bomb. And the dockyard was empty of ships because it was all down south. So we got all of the dockyard resources focused on the Glasgow. Everything got fixed up. There's quite a lot of damage. And then there was some upgrades to the guns and stuff that we needed while we was going down for our second deployment. So we set up again after a few weeks and met quite a lot of the fleet coming back home for the first time. So we were going back for our second stint. I did not want to go down there again. But, at least I got to go ashore this time.
You obviously you'd been hit, so then you've got that added kind of you've been hit already. There's that fear of you being hit. So what was the situation when you got hit? Or was it kind of talk me through that if you're happy to?
Yeah, of course I am. Yeah, we were doing what's called naval gunfire support. So a number of ships with the big 4.5-inch guns on the front were going close to the Falklands around Stanley Two Sisters, Mount Longdon, all the names of the ridges and the hills and the mountains that we remember from, you know, from the Falklands time. We used to go and soften up all of the targets on there, all of the RG positions, the guns. I should imagine, I don't know because I wasn't firing the gun, but you know, just the dugouts and just keeping them awake, and probably killing a lot of people. To be honest with you, probably killing a lot of people at the same time. So we'd go in during the night time because the Argentinians couldn't fly during the day; they didn't have that capability at the time. So we used to go in during the night time because we knew we were fairly safe. Yeah, black them, and then come away. And then for some reason, if my memory serves me right, the skipper came on the tannoy and said that he wasn't satisfied with just doing that. He wanted to go in during the day to try and tempt some of the Argentinian aircraft over so that we could have a go at them as well. And I thought, well, that's a fair comment. So we went in and we were sort of surprised. They came up over the mountains undetected. And we were sort of swarmed. I think there was 12 jets in all, swarming around in waves of 4, maybe 3 waves of 4. 4 would come across. We'd have a bit of a scrap with them, and then another 4. We'd have a scrap with them, and then another 4. And they were sort of circling around and buzzing about, dropping bombs over the ship. And the one that hit us was right in the middle, the midship part of the ship, and I was right in the middle section. So I think the best way to describe it, because of my job, I was midships mobile repair. So any damage, any flooding, any firefighting was done by us. Where the bomb came through, I was on the deck, having had the take cover, 1,000-pound bomb, wallop straight through, 500 and something miles an hour. And I've said it in the past, if I could have reached through the deck and dangled my fingers down into the space below, it would have hit my fingers. It was that close. So wow. That was a scary thing. It was loud. And then we were the first people down. So we jumped up. The chief stoker at the time, bloke called Ken Watson, bit of a hero of mine, he doesn't know it. He dragged us down there and shoved us down the hatch, went down the raking ladder, looked into the engine room, and there was daylight in there. So 2 whacking great big holes, really bright green sea coming through, like in like a fountain, horizontal fountain. My mate was down. Well, there was 3 lads down there all together. They were all safe. My mate was down there, was called Pete Travis, and he was stood in a particular position in between 2 of the big gearboxes that drive the propellers. And he was as white as a sheet. His mouth was going up and down. I don't think he quite knew what had happened. But yeah, it was just an amazing time. I was down there for 3 days with the rest of the mobile repair party. We were soaking. We got hypothermia. We were being electrocuted. We were covered in diesel. But everybody kept their morale up. Everybody, you know what it's like in the forces. Nobody wants to be seen to be down. Everybody's taking the miss and taking the mick and taking the piss out of each other and laughing. And even when I think back to it and the things that we were doing, especially when we was getting electrocuted, we were like holding each other up towards where the hole was above us, and the cables were dangling down and touching somebody's head, and then they get shot, and then the people that were holding them would be getting shot, and the people that were holding them were getting shot because we was all soaking wet through, and it's salt water, so the electricity passes all the way through everybody, and it was horrendous. It was painful, but it was so funny. I can't explain it. I literally can't explain it. I think we were so relieved that we were still alive and anything was funny. But we were down there for 3 days. We were using hand tools and things like that. We were so cold that we actually peed on our own hands to try and get, because it didn't matter. We were soaked through. It would constantly wash with waves coming through the side. So if you needed a pee, just stood with your hands between your legs and just peed on your hands. It was like, oh God, it was like luxury. Imagine the nicest thing in the world that can happen to you. Everything that we've got nowadays, pina coladas flying on the Concorde, being on a luxury cruise, and the nicest thing in the world is pissing on your hands to try and get some feeling back. And when you get the opportunity, somebody else was having a pee, and you've got to stick your hands in between their thighs. And you couldn't, it's wrong. It sounds wrong now, and you think, well, but that it is what needed to be done. because you couldn't hold on to the tools, the hammers and the chisels and the welding equipment. We were freezing. But yeah, I'm not even sure I've ever said that to somebody before. I've always kept that one back. Not sure.
Well, now it's time to announce it now on a platform.
Yeah.
So fair play. Yeah. I've only got nearly 2,000 subscribers, so you're all right. We're not getting too far.
Yeah, but we were in the Navy after all. I suppose somebody's going to say that, aren't we? We were in the Navy. Of course, you did that. No,
yeah, it was well documented, wasn't it? Back down south, that the weather was kind of really, really, really cold. The troops on the ground as well have kind of documented that the weather was kind of horrendous down there. So then you've got that added bit being on a ship with the ice cold sea coming in and hypothermia, and I've always said as well, one of the biggest battles with the Falklands as well as the enemy was obviously the conditions, and that's exactly the same for yourselves on the ship, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. Although, if you'd have given me a chance, the opportunity to go ashore with a weapon, I'd have gone ashore. I would have felt safer ashore. I feel like I don't know that because I don't know that for sure. But at the time, I felt if I could get off the ship and go ashore with a weapon, I would rather be on land because at least I can see what's happening. Because like, you're in a tin box. We're being attacked all the time, and you can't run anywhere. And if you've already sort of settled, on the fact that you're probably not going to come home, it's just now. How is it going to happen then? Is it going to be fire? I'm going to get blown to bits. Am I going to drown? You know what I mean? Once you've settled on that, you know it's going to happen. In my mind, and I think a lot of people as well, they've sort of gone, okay, well, I know it's going to happen. I just hope it's not this, or I hope it's not that. And if you can't see, then I would rather have been ashore. At least I could see where it was all coming from, and I could point my rifle and do something about it.
Well, you're on a night. You said before you're isolated. You're very vulnerable, and then you're on a damaged vessel as well. So kind of, I can understand where you're coming from. That at least you feel like you've got options when you were on land to kind of move left, move right, get out the way of stuff, take cover. But if you're on this isolated kind of box floating in the sea, it is a bit of a vulnerable place to be, isn't it? Especially, did you lose power? Was the ship still maneuverable at this time with the damage it had suffered?
Yeah, but it was severely limited with regards to two of the big engines were quite badly damaged and couldn't be used at that moment. I think we limped home eventually on one engine, and that couldn't be stopped because you do normally have to stop and do maintenance on them and cleaning and stuff like that. So eventually we limped home on one engine and it couldn't be stopped. Yeah, we did. We suffered with lack of power, lack of firefighting water main. There was all sorts of damage. There was all sorts of damage in the engine room. It caused a lot of chaos. But
right. So you kind of made your way, got repaired, you went back down. Was the second stint as intense as the first stint, or was it would it have died down a little bit by that time, or?
Yeah, it died down. I think the surrender documents had been signed. I've got a feeling the Argies were probably off the island. I think everybody had been sent home from their point of view. We went into Port Stanley and had a mooch about there, walked up in the mountains, even though we weren't supposed to, followed where the paras and the Scots Guards had been, and went through all the minefields, even though we're not supposed to. But you're going to do it, aren't you? You're going to go and have a look and see what weapons you can play with and stuff like that. And we did.
Absolutely, yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. We had some bomb disposal guy came on board and said, "This is what you can touch. This is what you can't touch. This is how to use a hand grenade. Don't touch it." I mean, fancy telling us. But then don't go in the minefields and all this sort of thing. And so we, of course, the first thing we did, we just headed straight to the minefields and up into the mountains to go and see what we could. Yeah, go and see what we could get, and just had a jolly old time up there. It was great fun.
Did you get up Longdon? Did you have a walk up Longdon? And
yeah. And I was talking about this with an islander the other day, saying that in my memory I only went ashore once, but when I went back 2 years ago, I actually went back down to the Falklands, for the 40th commemoration of the war. I can't believe it's 40 years. Anyway, so I actually went back down, and when I looked at the scale of where everything was, I thought that's impossible. I must have gone ashore more than once, but it's 40 years ago. So I've always thought I've only been ashore once in what was then Port Stanley. I've only been ashore once, and I did all these things. I was up to sisters on wireless radios at London, and then I looked at the scale of it and thought that's impossible. It must have happened over more than one shore visit. Yeah, got mightily drunk, mind I tell you, in the Globe, and I got bored. And at the time, I believe the Globe was the only pub in the Falklands, which is a country in its own right. So I dined out for years on the fact that I was barred from all of the pubs in the whole country, which was only one. And I went back in as well. I went back in the master before I was still barred, and they went, "Nah, you're all right."
You're right now. 40 odd years has passed. We'll let you off.
They couldn't remember me anyway.
Right. So obviously moving on from the Falklands, and you've kind of come home. And how long after the Falklands did you decide to leave the Navy? Was it like the following year?
No. I did another. So that was in 1982. Joined in 80. That was in 1982. Left in 1986. So probably around about another 4 years. I suppose in total, I'm edging towards 6 years in total in the Navy. Not just, is it 5.5? Is it 5? Is it 6? I tend to say 6. I'll edge up to 6. So
there's
I did some more. I went on another 7, 8.
Yeah.
No. I did it around about 5.5 to 6 years, something like that. But I went on another ship, another Type 42 called HMS Gloucester, which was that was a slightly modified version of the Glasgow, but it was longer. It was a bit more modern. Great ship's company, but it actually even the Gloucester went on to sort of distinguish itself during the Gulf War. I think it was. That was the only ship that's ever taken down an inbound missile using its own weapon systems. So it stopped a missile coming, and that was there. So they went through their own version of what I did, I suppose, albeit in a bit warmer circumstances. But
fair play.
If you're scared to death, you're scared to death, aren't you? No matter where you are.
Yeah, no, 100%, Paul, 100%. Yeah, you can't change that factor, can you?
No.
So obviously you left in 1986. Did you then join straight into the fire service?
Tried to. I heard that there was recruiting, and so I jumped on the recruitment trail, and it took 4 years from getting accepted. I think they've got like 60 jobs. I think the advert said something like this: 60 jobs over the next 4 years, where we anticipate there'll be retirements and ill health retirements. And so if they invite you to apply, so I applied. I've always assumed, because my name began with W for Williams, I was at the back of the queue, so I got on after 4 years. So I joined in 1990 at Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. I did my training, which was good fun, at Mansfield, at the old training school, and then went to Beeston Fire Station for my probation, which was a really quiet station, but really it was a good station, but very, very quiet. I wanted to see a bit more action personally. The guys on the station were fine. It was like a gentleman's club at the time. Everything was sports related. If you didn't play sports or compete against another station on a particular day, it was a real bad day.
Right. Okay.
Compared to then, I then jumped forward and went to my first busy station, which was Arnold, where I lived, very close to where I lived. And I went from Beeston, where I had no real bad incidents. I saw some not some deaths. I saw some bad burns and things. But I went to Arnold, and in the first 18 months, I had 12 dead bodies, kilo ones, we call them now, don't we? So I had 12 kilo ones in the first 18 months, which was like, oh wow, so this is what the fire brigades are like. And I soon realised it didn't really bother me, to be honest with you. I've always had this. I don't know if that came from the forces. Like, I've been through this in the forces. It's that bad that nothing else really bothers me, and I do feel there is a bit of that about me. I don't get upset with stuff too easily. You've got to go a long
you
way.
bulletproof yourself, isn't it? It's like you kind of from a young age, if you've gone in, and I'm very similar to yourself in that respect. I joined at a young age in the military, and I found that in my time in the fire service, I have been to quite a few fatals and things like that, and I'm the same as what you've said there. I'm very lucky that it's not really bothered me, but that's not to say it won't in the future. I say this quite a lot, so you've got to be almost prepared for it, and I think I am prepared that maybe something might get me in the future or may affect me, but I'm very lucky, like yourself, that it hasn't so far, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I had a minor issue towards the back end of my career. I used to get a bit down in the dumps when it came to November, the 11th of the 11th, or around about the times when the Falklands War was off, but it was nothing major. It was just like, I think it was more to do with people harping on about it online. I used to think, oh God, not this again. It really I used to come away from Facebook. And then at the same time as well, I was feeling like that. And at the same time, we were doing a huge amount of work in the persons at risk team. And the pressure was on because everybody we dealt with was about to die from a fire. And I was a junior officer as well. So there's loads and loads of pressure on. And eventually, I felt like I was about to lose my rag in the office one day with a civvy, actually. So it was a bit awkward. I felt like, you know what, any second now, I'm going to blow my stack. And so I walked out the office and walked home. I walked home from Central back to Arnold to cool off. And on the way home, I thought, this isn't me. This doesn't feel normal for me. And I feel like I've done something wrong by walking away, even though I knew it was the right thing. So I rang the occupational health nurse on the way home and said, look, I've just had nearly had a bust up with somebody who didn't deserve it, probably. And I've stormed out the office in a bit of a huff, and I'm walking home. I can't face going back to work today. And the occupational health nurse says, right, you've done the right thing. I thought, oh, thank God. I was expecting to be up on a fizzer for something. And she says, no, you've done the right thing. Don't worry. It was on a Friday. She says, don't worry. I'll book you some counselling. I will book you some counselling. I'll let you know. So by the following Monday, which was only the weekend, I went and saw a bloke and had some CBT. And it was good. It got me over it. It got me over a real small little hump. And that's really the only thing. That's really the only thing that I've sort of had any issue with. And it wasn't major, never took any drugs on. I think I had about 6 sessions of CBT, which was great. But the CBT only lasts a short amount of time because you forget to use the techniques that they teach you, which was a big lesson to me later on. So it was before I got involved with other people's mental health. It was a big lesson to me. I thought, this is great. It really is very good. It's like doing first aid on somebody. It does the job at the time, but then you need them. Either you get better or you need more intervention. Luckily for me, I got better, but the CBT stopped working because it wasn't feasible that I'd be able to walk around thinking every time I get anxious or pissed off with something, I need to think X, Y, and Z, breathe in, breathe out, do all these little tricks that they teach you because you just forget to do it and you end up back in the same place. I learned that later on.
The viewers and the viewers and the followers, CBT. What can you explain that abbreviation? Because people may not be aware of what it is.
So it's like it's sort of a form of like psychotherapy. It would be, I think the acronym is cognitive behavioural therapy. So it's like saying you've fallen into a pattern of behaviour. So you're not sort of diagnosed with anything. You're not like depressed or anything like that. They're just saying, look, you know what, you're feeling a bit down in the dumps. When you feel like this, count to 100, think of nice things, take yourself to your happy place. So it's like readjusting the way you think.
Right.
And they give you some exercises to do so that you can sort of retrain your mind. Actually, at the end of it, I was thinking, wow, now that I've done the CBT, that I feel like this is how I used to be. This is how I am. This is the normal me. And it didn't take very long, but it doesn't particularly last long. It's sort of a short-term fix. It's like topping up your oil in your car because you've got a leak. Doesn't fix the leak. It just means that the oil's at the right level today. So CBT in my mind is just keeping the things that are upsetting you away from you. Just push them along. And the first time you forget to push them away, they're straight back where they were. So you haven't fixed the problem.
Right. Okay.
You've soothed it.
Kind of. Yeah, you've soothed it. Yeah, I kind of that kind of makes sense. I suppose it's a bit like managing it to the best of your ability, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But don't get me wrong. It was good, and it helped me over a few weeks, like maybe about 5 or 6 weeks. An hour's session with a guy, and he was really good. And I enjoyed going. I enjoyed the process. I can remember the lessons, but I don't use them now because I sort of fixed myself.
Yeah. Well, if you've learned about it as well, which is what you've kind of where you've moved from. So you've obviously gone through your did you do 30 years in the fire service?
I should have done. I did 27, and then my 6 years in the Navy bought me 3 years worth of being able to leave early, early retirement one. So I could have stayed, but I thought, well, why would I stay? I'd be working for like a third of my pay when I can retire and have 2/3 of my pay and not go to work. So that's what I did.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, doesn't it? So towards the end of the career in the fire service, you went across to the persons at risk team. Is that right?
Yeah, and it was sort of like the last 9 or 10 years actually, because I'd injured my back, and I've been to see the brigade doctor, and he'd said, look, the best thing you can do is stop lifting heavy stuff, like LPPs, the pumps and the ladders and the things that are on the fire engine. It's not doing you any good, and in fact, it could do you some damage for later on in life. So if you can get promoted, go and do that. So that's what I did. I took a promotion I didn't really want, and went to work at the persons at risk team in community safety. But it was eye-opening. I'd always shied away from sort of paperwork and office work, and I found I could be really good at it. But I'm trying to blow my own trumpet. I found I was really good at it. Maybe I've got that wrong. I found out that I was a lot better at it than I realised I probably would be. It would be more.
You took to it probably a lot better than you thought you were going to, and that's probably why you shied away from it, because maybe I'll not be very. There's a lot of things in life you do that, and you don't know till you try them, do you? So
yeah, if you'd have asked me, would you like to work in an office? The answer was absolutely not. And then I found out actually I was all right. I was okay. I could do it. So I went to work in there, and then towards the end. So basically, what I was doing was working with the most vulnerable people in the county, and it was the people that were going to die in fires. And we got like a police officer working with us, or a retired police officer who had his own little fire station inside our office, and he could get onto all the police computers. His name was Kev. I won't say his full name. His name was Kev, and he taught me how to behave with other agencies, and how to do my job in a real like policeman-like way. So I was working with people from all over the county, prostitutes, drug addicts, people who are dealing with people who've been involved with terrorism, people who are involved with sex offences, who are at threat of being set on fire, arson and things like that. So some really heavy stuff, and it was really interesting. I was dealing with a lot of hoarders, and this is where my interest in mental health came from. I noticed that a lot of the people who were hoarding, I used to call it collecting. When I spoke to them, I say, you collect a lot of stuff. I never said hoarders because it seemed such an abrasive term, and it seemed abusive to me to call. Like if I was talking in a professional manner with my colleagues, I'd say hoarding. But when I was talking to the person in front of me, I'd say, you've got a lot of stuff in your house. When did you start collecting? And it nearly always came about because of a loss of something, either a loss of a parent, a loved one, a wife, a husband, a marriage, a breakup, a split up, somebody's lost their job, or something like that. And that's where the problem started. And it didn't seem to matter however much we tried to help and however much we did, they always went back to how they were, a bit like with the CBT. The problem didn't get fixed. And the problem in my head, the problem as I saw it, was up here with them. they were chasing after something. They wanted to keep hold of things because it gave them pleasure, because they were missing something that had gone away.
Yeah.
And that's where, so I then started self-studying to do with mental health, which was really, really helpful, because I could then help people and have an understanding about people with schizophrenia, for instance. So when I was learning about the schizophrenia module on the course that I did, I actually had schizophrenic patients, not patients. They were patients to their doctors, but I had schizophrenic clients, and I could relate to it. And now I understood it. And instead of me trying to tell them you this, that, I worked with them instead of me trying to impose the fire service way. I asked them what they would like, and then suggested alternatives that might work, but they still fulfilled what they wanted to do. So, for instance, I can remember a guy, or I don't know if I might say his name, but I can remember a guy who was schizophrenic, and he was open about it, and he was burning candles on the floor in his flat. It was a bit bizarre, on white pieces of paper. And it had to be a white piece of paper. It had to be white. He hated anything that wasn't white, the colour white. Hated anything that wasn't white. And so I couldn't persuade him that the paper might set on fire, little tea lights. I couldn't persuade him that it was dangerous, and it was dangerous, and that the tea light might set the paper on fire because, for whatever reason. And then, oh, what about a white plate? Would that do the same? Yes, of course it would. So let's go to your cupboard. Let's go and see how many white plates you got. And he got enough. So let's replace the paper with a white plate. Now you're safe. So he's still got to burn his candles. They're still on a white candle holder. And now we're just taking the fire source away. So it was like relating to people through. So using my training, I was now able to relate to people. And I found it fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to have an interest in that thing, haven't you?
Yeah.
I think when it comes to mental health, or it comes to kind of going down them avenues, you can't just pay it lip service. And I think that's what's been happening a lot of the time in the past. Again, with certain organizations, just paying a bit of lip service to it, where when you need individuals like yourself that generally have a passion for it, and want to get proper involved, and like you say, do the research about the people that your clients and stuff like that. So it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because again, like I say, you've got to have that interest.
It was tricky because the bosses, they didn't share my view. They wanted numbers. They wanted home risk assessment, like safe and well, they call it now. Safe and well check, safe and well. They wanted a list of how many you've done this week. Well, I might have done one, but it might have taken me absolutely hours. But now that it's been done properly, this person is not going to die in a fire, and neither are the people that live above him or below him in the flats that he's in. So they couldn't see the value. A lot of them couldn't see the value in concentrating on the real hard, heavy cases. They just wanted numbers through the books. But anyway, I used to have that fight when it came up.
Yeah,
in the end, I think they saw me as a bit of a trouble causer, because in the end, I always used to get my way, because logic just works. It just makes sense.
Yeah, but they kind of, you like to think they'd see that again. You're not being argumentative. You're trying to push something that's important, and sometimes I think numbers and figures sort of come in the way, and that's with all organizations. I think they kind of try and push. They want numbers. It looks statistics and stuff like that over quality sometimes. And that's not always kind of the right way to go about it, is it? And I think that's been proven time and time again. So obviously you're coming up, you spent your last sort of 9-10 years in the persons at risk team. That's springing forward now. You're leaving the fire service. So when you retire from the fire service, what did you kind of move into, and what did you carry on with the mental health kind of journey and kind of working in that industry?
There was an invitation went out for people who were interested in helping people with poor mental health within the fire service, or the firefighters basically, but it's also extended to the civilian staff. If anybody's interested, we're starting a peer support group. It'll involve quite some heavy training, and put your expression of interest in. So I did, and lucky for me, I was one of the 20 that was selected. And that started my journey proper. So that's when I got properly trained by John Durkin, Dr. John Durkin, along with Sean McCallum and Paul Meakin, who were the instigators of the team. And I was actually out of the 20 for probably about 5 or 6 years. I was the only one that qualified because it was quite tough. Then Sean was next to qualify, and then just rocketed. He started to become a trainer. He started to investigate other methods that he could use. He's really, really got the bit between his teeth. It's something a bit special like that, is Sean.
Yeah. So well, Sean, I've spoke before. Sean's obviously Responder Resilience, isn't he? That's part of the company that you work with him closely on Responder Resilience, don't you? And they're one of the sponsors of the podcast. So,
well, after we trained, probably about a year later in London, there was the 2 terrorist attacks on London Bridge, Westminster Bridge, and the Grenfell Tower disaster. And Dr. Durkin had been in touch with the Met Police, and they'd asked him if he would do some work with the police officers who responded to either one, or in some cases, all 3 of those incidents. And so a team of up to about 12 people went down to London. I think I was down there totally over about 12 days, not in one 12-day block, but a weekend here, a week there, another weekend there, talking and dealing with the police officers that had witnessed the murders and the sad deaths that had happened at Grenfell. Not when I say murders, I'm talking about the terrorist murders. And it was just amazing. And I don't like. I mean, there's always been a bit of friction between the police and the fire service. Like it's a bit like the paras and the Navy, or the paras and the Marines, or whatever. There's always that sort of who's the best and that sort of thing. And it's the first time I've ever felt like, wow, these guys, I know the police are under the cosh in the Met at London, but they've got nothing but admiration from me, because I sat and listened firsthand to what they went through, and it was amazing. Amazingly brave. There was one police officer, female, who was explaining how she'd come across one casualty on one of the bridges who'd been stabbed multiple times. And she'd run out of, she'd had a little first aid pack on her belt, and she'd run out of bandages. And so she was having to put her elbows into stab wounds, and then a hand here, a knee there. She was just running out of pressure, places where she could apply pressure. She had explained how she, when she was trying to get the bandages out of the packages, the hands were covered in blood, and she couldn't hold the bandage because it was covered in plastic. She was having to rip the bandages open with her teeth, and there was blood all in her mouth and on her face. And how she knew it was going to be her last day on earth, she said, I know I'm going to die. I know he's going to come and stab me or shoot me, because at the time they believed that there was guns, although it turned out not to be the case. But she was on, like, I know I'm going to die. And she just came out with this absolutely matter-of-factly. And I sat there and thought, wow. And she didn't run.
Wow.
That's what she said. I knew it was going to be my last day on earth, but I couldn't leave my casualty. Wow. And just down the road, there's a bloke down there stabbing people, and I'm next, and I am. It was just amazing. So the level of respect I got for those people that attended those on that day, wow, just amazing. We also ended up going into the Houses of Parliament, Portcullis House, to work with some guys who had witnessed the stabbing of their friend. Who, remember the other terrorist attack where some guy jumped over the barriers at the House of Parliament and stabbed one of the police officers there. So I went and worked with that guy as well. That was in the Margaret Thatcher room in the House of Parliament. That was amazing. I mean, at the time, I was not a Margaret Thatcher fan, so that was a bit of a. I'd have picked any other room but the Margaret Thatcher room. But anyway, we did some work together, me and this guy, and I think he'd been off work for about 6 weeks. He'd been sick, and by the end of it, I got him to have a conversation. It was one of the techniques we use is called unfinished business, I got him to have a conversation with the terrorist who stabbed his mate and who he'd witnessed being stabbed. And wow, this conversation was amazing. I facilitated the conversation. So he would tell the terrorist what he wanted to say, and then I would say, and what would the terrorist say to that? And then he'd reply what he thought the terrorist. And this conversation went backwards and forwards for about 20 minutes. It was harrowing, but he got so much charge off his chest. He screamed and shouted and swore and all the things that you can't do. But because I was quite happy to sit and listen to him and allow him to, and I told him, you can use the language that you want to use, don't mind. You won't upset me. The details won't upset me. The language won't upset me. You can be as non-PC as you want to be. I will not tell anybody what's been said. Well, he just came out with it. It was like a machine gun go. And by the time, at the end, he stood up. After about 20 minutes, he stood up. He went, right, I'm done. Shook my hand, said, thank you very much. You're a friend for life. I'm booking fit. I'm coming back to work tomorrow. And all he needed was to be heard. That's all he wanted to do, was tell his story in the way that he wanted to tell it. And just that simple act of somebody listening impassively, not reacting, and allowing somebody else to speak using the language and the terms that they want to use. That's all it, and a lot of the time, that's all it is. People just need to be heard and acknowledged. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, pal. I mean, like I say, I have spoke to kind of, obviously hearing you kind of describe it, and obviously I've spoke to Sean about it in the past, and my fiance is part of the crisis team now. She's done the training. She really finds it kind of fascinating and kind of interested at the same time, but also kind of feel like you're really, really kind of helping individuals and getting down to the nitty gritty stuff and kind of helping them kind of, like you say, and being non-judgmental. And because I bet some of the time there's the fear of being judged. It comes back to that thing with mental health and the fear of being judged for admitting it, and then kind of fear of being judged for what you're going to say. And if you're there as an impartial kind of, sometimes it's better to speak to someone that you don't really know, isn't it?
Yeah,
Rather than someone that you do know.
Yeah. I mean, if you can speak to a family member in terms of been to a nasty incident today, and this is what happened when you get back home, that's great. But sometimes you don't want to share the details of what's happened with I'm loath to say civilian people. They're not a breed apart, but with people who aren't in the industry. You know, you don't want to share that out there. You don't necessarily want to tell people what it was like and a lot of the stuff is like what it smelled like and things like that. You know, it's not the sort of thing that you do. So to have somebody who commits to you, like I use my commitment of, you can say what you want. I won't report back to anybody. I don't take notes. I'm not going to walk around with this in my head. Don't think you're going to upset me, because you're not. I promise you, you won't. I'm like made out of stone. You won't hurt me. So say what you want. I just want you to hear you saying it. And then they get it off the chest. And I think it's that resilience again, coming from the forces, having like been to the point where you think you're going to die, coming to terms with it, and then everything after that moment in your life is a massive bonus. So somebody else's trauma doesn't belong to me. And that's what I tell them. You know, I won't walk away with this in my heart and worry about you for the next week. I just won't. And that sounds harsh, but I'm sorry, it just won't happen. You can say what you want, mate. And then once you get that idea that there's not a camera in the room, that you're not scribbling notes, that you're not going to report back, you know, we can have the conversations that we would probably have if the camera wasn't on now. Me and you would probably talk in a slightly different way. Being ex-forces, we would probably speak to each other in a different way to how we're presenting ourselves when you think people are going to be watching later on.
Yeah, you're right there, and I think that's everyone's the same in that aspect. But what I want to ask you is, like, obviously, and I don't know if it's something that kind of gets mentioned or gets brought up. You might be able to tell me different, but kind of. So you take on a lot. You know, you get a lot of people coming in unloading their kind of problems and their deepest, darkest kind of worries and traumas and stuff that they've seen, from ranging from childhood trauma to, you know, whatever it may be. You're taking that on. Do you find that sometimes you can be in a position, because I suppose it's a bit of a taboo. Everyone that speaks to any sort of therapist or anyone that's working it, they kind of, I don't think people really take into account that you're also hearing these stories and taking almost a part of the burden. Do you understand what I mean? If you know what I mean.
I do. I do, and I wouldn't suggest my worldview on it as that's the only way forward. It's, I think, just my background and my circumstances allow me to put a hard hat on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
A mental hard hat. I'm not this, and I had this in the fire service as well. Like, you know, like earlier we mentioned about the 12 dead bodies in 18 months. I'd already come to terms that I was going to see blood, snot, guts, and dead bodies. So in my head, it wasn't a surprise. It was just like, well, yeah, that's what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to see them, but I signed up knowing that this is going to happen.
It might.
That I might. And then when it does, yeah, okay. And funnily enough, do you know, when I joined the Navy, I went to do my trade training at a place called HMS Sultan. No, I forgot them. It's my age. I went to do my trade training, and one of the chief instructors there, he gave us a big lecture once, and he said, "You are here to die for your country. Don't you ever get the idea that you're on a jolly. You're not. You are here to die." This was before the Falklands. And the last time we'd been involved in conflict was probably the Suez Canal. And the time before that was the Second World War. So for him to say that, it just, oh, okay. It's not a jolly. It's not a holiday. It's not Club 18 to 30s. At the end of the day, when you say jump, we're going to jump into it, and we're going to potentially end up dying. So when the Falklands blew up, maybe 18 months or 2 years later, it wasn't a shock. It wasn't like, hang on a minute, I didn't sign up for this. I already knew. When I joined the fire service, it wasn't a shock to me, and I wasn't upset when I saw dead bodies or limbs hanging off. I already knew this is what I'm going to be looking at. And so now when I go and do my work with other people, I already know the sort of stuff that they're going to be talking about, and I'm not surprised. But it doesn't belong to me, and I refuse to accept that, you know, it's mine to go and think about. I'll only think about it in terms of what we're going to do next week. Now you've said this. Now we've done this week. If I'm going to see them the following week, what are we going to do next week? I'll think about it in those terms. What did they say? What might be a good topic or a good technique to use next week? I'll think about it in those terms, but emotionally, no, I just refuse. No. But that's my circumstances probably differ enormously, like yours do, probably differ enormously to other people. So I've found that in the fire service now, people are a lot more in touch with their emotions and much more likely to get upset. And I don't understand why that is, but I do, but I don't. I do, but my way isn't that way.
Yeah, well, people deal with it, like you say, people kind of have different ways of processing it and how they deal with it. And I don't think the way that you deal with it is a bad way at all, because it's almost like you bulletproof yourself from it. And that's my way as well. But that's not to say that's everybody's way. But kind of, I'm happy with it the way. That's how I do it as well. I've almost kind of bulletproofed myself, always kind of prepared. And in my own head, I knew what I was getting into with the fire service. I knew what I was doing when I went to work in Iraq on the CP circuit and the military. I knew that I was going to encounter nasty things, nasty experiences, but I was always set myself up for that. And, you know, I think that's definitely part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you say, it's not the only way, and it's not the only valid way. It's just, I think our circumstances are different to most, and some people might look at this and go, well, actually, you're just suppressing your emotions, you're suppressing it and shoving it away into a cupboard, and it'll pop out one day, and you'll be really upset. And I don't think that's true for me. I don't think that's true for me. I'm not suppressing it, because when I need to deal with something, I just get it out and deal with it. If I could be bothered, if something bothered me enough, but I'll give you a for instance. I'm a granddad now, and one of my clients talks about sexual abuse, and it was long standing, and it was prolific sexual abuse as a young child. And at one stage, just one day, when I'd finished with her, I felt I needed to go and speak to my wife about it. Not about what had happened to the woman, just about how that related to me and how it made me feel. And for a short, very, very short period of time, I thought, I wonder what people think about me when I'm kissing and cuddling my grandkids. It just struck me. And it was just a bit of an overreaction to listening to what my client had said. And my wife she just gave me some really great advice and said, you name one person in the world who would think that about you. It was just a massive silence. I couldn't put my finger on one. Well, nobody. What are you on about then? That was very just like, what are you on about then? Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. It was just that one little instance where this poor woman had gone into graphic detail about what had happened to her over a number of years. And it had happened on more than, so I dealt with the subject on more than one occasion. So it was sort of maybe over 3 or 4 sessions. And at the end of it, I thought, oh, what people think about me. It was just a strange thought I had. Then when I spoke to my wife, and she went, just name a single person in the world that would think that about you. And I couldn't do it. So it doesn't exist. It was just what I constructed for myself. So I dealt with it. I didn't like sit there and worry about it. I dealt with it. Like when I stormed out of the office one time and walked home and rang the brigade nurse. I dealt with it straight away. Went and did CBT, engaged with the bloke, did everything he told me to do, and at the end of it, it sort of went away. It went away. I nudged it on its way using my own techniques eventually, but I didn't shy away from it and hide. I'm just open.
Yeah. So, look, before we kind of like wrap up, I just want to ask you what sort of message you could possibly give, or what sort of advice you could give to people out there that are genuinely struggling. Because again, I'm sure you're aware, and I make no secret of it. I say it on pretty much every podcast I do. My goal is to kind of get people being a bit more open. And I don't mean, and sometimes there's a lot of oversharing with stuff that's not necessarily, kind of relevant. But you know what I mean? When there's someone struggling with their mental health, it's kind of what message do you give, pass out there to people that are struggling with their mental health and stuff that, they kind of need to probably address?
Yeah. Find somebody that you can talk to. Find somebody that you trust enough that will listen, even if you've got to give them the instructions. I want you to listen, but I don't want you to comment. I just want to be heard, and ask them to acknowledge it. And by acknowledge it, but you can just say, okay, I heard you. I think people just need to be heard. So find somebody you can trust that will sit and listen without passing judgment and just acknowledge what you've told them. And repeat it again. So if something's upsetting you, go and find somebody you trust to tell, and then tell them more than once. Can I go through that again so I can get it off my chest? Yeah, of course you can. Okay. This is what happened. This is why I'm feeling like this, and just go through it. And the more times you go through it, it's almost like it's like letting air out of a balloon. The pressure starts to deflate, and you get back to your normal. But go and find somebody you can trust, that's not going to gossip, that's just going to, even if it's a stranger, go find somebody you can talk to, and somebody that, if you've got a friend or a loved one that you can talk to, who's not going to start giving you advice and telling you their experience, just somebody that's just going to acknowledge that you're upset. I hear you. Okay, I understand. Tell me about that again. That sort of thing. It absolutely, when people feel like they're going to pop, it just lets the balloon down so that they're, you know, they're nowhere near the edge.
Right. Yeah. No, that kind of makes sense. And if that kind of is not something they can do, they can reach out to kind of responder resilience and stuff that you're doing now. Is that right?
Yeah, they can. If particularly if they're in the service, within Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service, they can reach out to us and be listened to. Get that sort of response back where people are interested. But you know, they're just going to give you the time to say and do what you want to say, and maybe guide you. They might guide you with some techniques, but all it is to get you to open up, and then it stays there as long as you're not threatening to kill the king or, you know, jump off a bridge. It stays between you two of you. Yeah, like most of the time I deal with new clients and they're really nervous, particularly men. They say, "I'm really worried. I feel like I'm going to cry," and I just say, "You say what you want. You can cry in front of me, mate. I don't mind."
Yeah. No,
It's okay to
awesome
cry.
stuff, pal. Yeah, no, 100%. No, well, thank you very much. I know you wanted to, before we finish off, I know you wanted to mention a particular kind of, I figured you may have forgot, but I remembered.
I had forgot. Oh, it's just a shout out to the Scars for Falklands Veterans Group, run by Rachel, who is an awesome lady who brings lots of love and care to a lot of the Falklands veterans from all branches of the service. And they knit scarves and do nice things and pass little gifts on to veterans. And I just want to say thank you to Rachel because she's an awesome lady. So Scars for Falklands Veterans.
Brilliant. And is there a link? Has she got a Facebook page with stuff like that, or?
No, it's sort of a closed group. You've got to be one of the class of 82. You've got to be a Falklands veteran or family of somebody who's deceased. You know, you've got to have a link to it. But I'll point her in the direction. So I dare say that the guys on the site will get to see this podcast when it comes out, and at least they'll know that I've shouted the names out.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Andy. Thank you very much for chatting to me. I will, like I do with all the guests, I'll have a quick 5 minutes with you after I stop recording. But
Yeah.
no, it's been a real insight into kind of the work you do and the kind of the kind of mental health route, and you know, another avenue that people can go down and kind of use and utilize if they need. And I feel like the more I speak to different people, I spoke to someone last week regarding hypnotherapy for mental health. I just feel like the more tools and the more kind of avenues there are to go down, then surely one of these routes will kind of help someone, because they're not, you know,
Yes.
everyone's different and everything else.
Everybody.
So the more we can talk about it and speak to different sort of people with different things, I genuinely feel it will help eventually.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing these conversations to the fore. It's massively important, particularly amongst men as well, who just don't open up very easily, mostly. And so when they see the likes of an ex-paratrooper, you know, if you can do it, mate, we can all do it.
Yeah, that is the avenue again. You know, you get military on and guys and firefighters and people talking about the things, and hopefully that will push people to think, well, like exactly what you've just said. They're happy to talk about it, you know, and so I can as well. And I think that's massively important. And I think hopefully it's going to be a good message to push out there, and people will take it on board. So, but again, thank you very much for having a chat with me, pal. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I might catch you for a brew at some point. I think you're kind of around the area, and if you pop into Mansfield on your travels when White Watch are on, come and have a brew and a chat, mate. I'd love that.
Love it, mate. Looking forward to it already.
All right,
Cheers,
pal.
bud.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.